In this lesson, I'm going to give you a complete overview of all the theory topics you're going to need to know to understand playing piano or any instrument. Here are 4 things you're going to need to know right off the bat. Number 1, music theory is about observing the relationship between notes and note patterns, specifically how they move between each other. Notes can move up, notes can move down, or notes can stay the same. They can move in steps, meaning that you're just playing one note to the next. They can skip, meaning that you're skipping over every other note. Or they can move in leaps. Notes can be played at the same time to form harmony or chords as we know them. Notes can be played one at a time to create what we call a melody. And we can put harmony and melody together to fill out the sound of a song. Next, we got to talk about keys, because you're going to hear about these in your music all the time. You're going to hear people say, let's play in the key of G, or you're going to read a piece of music and it's going to be in the key of D, and you're going to have to know what that means. I define a key as a set of notes that are commonly used throughout a piece of music. So for example, if we have the key of C, we have from C up to the next C, and the key of C major by definition has 0 sharps, 0 flats. So if you play a piece in the key of C major, you're not going to be using any of the black keys, at least for the most part. They can write them in as accidentals, but you're not going to be playing any sharps or flats consistently throughout the piece. And in fact, you're very likely to have none at all. I'll throw another example for you. The key of G, for example, starts on G, goes up to the next G, but you got to be careful because in that key, there is an F sharp, and that defines the key of G. Now, I wanted to use this example to make a very specific point. When you are playing this F sharp, you are actually replacing F with F sharp. You're not going to play them both like this. It's... So the point is, every key has a number of sharps or flats or nothing at all. You're not going to have any keys with sharps and flats. It's one or the other or nothing. Now, what is a scale? Well, I just played a few. So when I was telling you about the key of C major, I actually played the C major scale. And all a scale is when you put all of the notes in a key, starting from what we call the tonic note, which is the key name, so key of C, starting from C, ending on C, and any of the scale notes in between. So for example, the key of D, and we'll go over how to figure these out in a minute, the key of D has 2 sharps, F and C, and you got to make sure that when you're playing the scale that every F is replaced with an F sharp and every C is replaced with a C sharp. Get it? Next, I want to talk about what we call the key signature. There it is. Key signature is a visual representation of the key, and it tells you how many sharps or flats are throughout this piece. And in this case, let's take a look at the example here. We have 8 flats, right? No, this is a very important point I want to make. So you see how there's some in the top clef and some in the bottom clef? They're actually the same notes. So we only have 4. You're not counting both the treble clef flats and the bass clef flats. They're actually the same. And let's double check this. We actually have double bass clef here. And sure enough, those are the exact same notes. So we have 4 flats, B, E, A, and D flat, and that's what the key signature tells us. And so the key signature visually tells us where those sharps or flats are, since if we had a note where those flats are, that tells us what note is flat. So on the second line of the bass clef, which is B, that means all B's in the whole piece, almost no matter what, are going to be flat. So how many keys are there? Well, for major keys, there's the key of C with 0 sharps, 0 flats. And then you have keys going from 1 sharp all the way up to 7. And same thing with flats. You can have a key with 1 flat and then a key with 2 flats all the way up to 7. But you can't have more than 7 flats or 7 sharps. And why is that? Well, if we go back to our key and our scale, let's just say we're in the key of C, right? How many notes in the scale? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 total notes. However, the first and last note are the same. So we have 7 individual notes. Therefore, think about it. If we sharped every one of these notes, which is actually the C sharp scale, we can't sharp any more notes. That's literally all the notes that we have. Same thing if we flatted all the notes. You know, I already hit 7 notes. I can't flat another note. So that's why it only goes up to 7 sharps or 7 flats or nothing at all, which is the key of C major. And don't worry, we're going to get into how to figure out each of these keys in just a moment. Speaking of which, I need to tell you about the order of sharps and the order of flats. Let's start with the order of sharps. The order of sharps is the order in which you're adding sharps to the key signature, and I want you to remember this. Are you ready? Order of sharps is F, C, G, D, A, E, B. And you need to know it by the back of your hand. F, C, G, D, A, E, B, right? Now let me show you where this comes into play with key signatures. So here we have this key signature with 1 sharp. And what sharp is that going to be? It's the first in your order sharp, which is going to be F, remember? Now let's say we have a key with 2 sharps. What 2 sharps do we have? It's the first 2 in your order sharps, F, C. So each key signature has the sharps of the one before it, or flats, but in this case sharps, plus you're adding 1. So the one with 3 sharps, what are they going to be? I don't even have to write it. It's F, C, and G. The one with 4 sharps is going to be F, C, G, and D, and let's test it. Yep, sure enough, if I had a note on each of those sharps where they're at, it would be F, C, G, and D. Which one would it, like how, what sharps would the one with 5 sharps be? I can't talk today. It would be F, C, G, D, A. Do you get it? Which one would have all 7 sharps, or what sharps would they be? F, C, G, D, A, E, B. Boom. That's why you learn your order of sharps. Now, order of flats. Order of flats, remember this. It's the order of sharps, but backwards. B, E, A, D, G, C, F. Or I remember as B, greatest common factor, as we remember from school, right? Let me show you just a couple of examples of a flat key signature. Here we have a key signature with 5 flats. Again, you're not counting both the treble clef and bass clef, just one. They're the same notes. Without looking, what 5 flats are they? B, E, A, D, G. Let's check it. Boom, that's what they were. If I had a note on each of those notes, it would be B, E, A, D, and G. See how that works? So the order of sharps and order of flats can help you figure out what flats or sharps in the key signature lightning quick. So now I have to tell you how to figure out what key that you're in, because believe it or not, the name of the key doesn't correspond to how many sharps or flats you have. For example, the key with 4 sharps, what 4 sharps are they going to be? Right? F, C, G, and D. So those 4 sharps are F, C, G, and D. But guess what? The key name is E, like a totally different one. So let me show you how to figure out, in a major key, by the way, how to figure out what key that you're in if you have sharps in your key signature. It's different for flats, by the way, so keep that in mind. Let's say we have this key signature here. We have 6 sharps, right? No, you got to remember it's only one or the other. They're both the same. So 3 sharps. And what 3 sharps do we have? F, C, and G. Well, guess what? The key name of the key is not F, C, or G, which you would want it to be, but it's not. Here is what it is. The name of this key is A. Now, how did I figure this out? It's very easy. So what you do is you go to the sharp all the way to the right. That's going to be this guy right here, or this one in the bass clef. Remember, they're the same note. And what you do is you find that note on the piano, which would be G sharp, right there. And then what you do is you go up 1 semitone or half step from there. And what note did I just play? I played A. Remember I said the key name was A, but our sharps were F, C, and G. So what you do is you go to the last sharp, you go up a half step, and that's your answer. Now, just real quick, say we had 6 sharps. Those 6 sharps are what? F, C, G, D, A, and E. Now, what was the last sharp I just said? I said E sharp. So you find E sharp on the piano. So remember, we're looking at this one. Anyway, it's the last sharp there, so you find it on the keyboard. E sharp, by the way, is F, and you sharp it one more time. You go up a half step, and guess what? The key of F sharp has 6 sharps, and those 6 sharps are what? Quick. F, C, G, D, A, and E. Are you getting it? Now we got to talk about the flats, because the flats, you don't go to the last flat and go up a half step. It's a little different. So let me show you. Okay, we have 4 flats here. What 4 flats are they? B, E, A, and D. Remember the first 4 in your order of flats. Now, remember what I said, it's not the same as sharps. So here's what you do. Are you ready? You go to not the last flat right here. You go to the next to last one right there. And you play that on the piano. So that would be A flat. Remember, second space of the treble clef. Let's get the piano up in here. Here we go. So here's A flat. You play A flat. And I got good news for you. That's the answer. You don't have to do anything with it. The answer to the flats is the next to last flat. So you go one all the way to the right, one in, and that is your answer. Now, hopefully, if you're paying super close attention, you have a very important question. And I know what question that is. Well, you're like, Tim, if you go to the next to last flat, what if you don't have 2 flats, right? Because then there is no next to last one. And let me show you what you do with that. So here we have 1 flat. And guess what? There is no next to last flat. So I just want you to play the note F. And that's the answer. So the answer to the 1 flat is you're just going to have to memorize that that's F. With any of the other flats, it's the next to last flat, the one all the way next to the last to the right, and that's the answer. And then with sharps, remember, it's the last one, and then you go up a half step. So you're going to have to practice these to make sure you don't mix them all up, because trust me, that will happen. Now, if you've been listening carefully, you notice that I've been saying major after all these scales. E major, E flat major, A flat major. And that's because all these keys have been major keys. At least hopefully I've been saying major this whole time. Now here's something I want to tell you. For every key, so say we have C major, there's a major key associated with that key signature. And by the way, major keys sound bright and happy. And there's a minor key associated with that key signature, which in this case would be the key of A minor. It's literally the same key signature as C major. You're just starting and ending on A now, the tonic notes. And just like that. See how just by moving it to A, it had a darker type of sound to it. And so you may be wondering, how do you figure out whether you're in a major key or a minor key? Well, the first thing I want to tell you is if you know if you're in a major key, or if you know the key signature of the major key and you're trying to find out what the minor is, here's the conversion. So remember, C major, 0 sharp, 0 flats. A minor, 0 sharp, 0 flats. What is the relation? Well, A minor is 1, 2, 3 semitones, or 3 half steps below that C. And that conversion reigns true for all major scales. So remember, the major scale with 1 sharp, F sharp, is the key of G. So if we want to find what we call the minor equivalent of G major, you go 1, 2, 3 half steps down. By the way, you don't count the first note as 1, you hit it, and then you go 1, 2, 3. Very important. So now we're playing basically the G major scale starting on E, which actually creates the E minor scale. Just like that. There's another thing, important thing I need to remind you about major scales versus minor scales. Minor scales. So let's go back to A minor. Just like that. It does not have what we call a leading tone, but the major does. And a leading tone is the next to last note that really wants to lead you back to the tonic. And by definition, the leading tone, next to last note, has to be a half step away from the tonic, the note we're ending on, right? So majors naturally have a leading tone. However, minors do not, because this next to last note is actually a whole step away. It should really be here. Now, I want to tell you that it's very, 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 very common for minor scales to add a sharp on that next to last note to create a leading tone, because it really pulls you back to the tonic. However, I want to tell you this is very important. In minor scales, the leading tone is not, repeat me, not part of the key signature. It will actually be shown as an accidental. So if you are playing a piece and it sounds dark and sad and you see a lot of sharps in the middle of the piece, that, or flats or naturals that are not supposed to be there, they're called accidentals, although they're purposely put there, which I find is odd. If you see a lot of accidentals in your piece, you know, or probably, that maybe you're dealing with a minor key and they're adding in that leading tone. So that is one key. Let me show you some other clues you can use to tell whether you're in major or minor. Here we have the Minuet G by Petzold. Now, we got to figure out, is this one in G major or G minor? So first thing I would do is I would take a look at the key signature. We have how many sharps? 2? No, just 1. Remember, you don't count the treble and the bass, just 1. So, and that sharp is F. And if you've been paying attention, you know already that you go up a half step, and then that's the key of G. Or is it? We could be in a minor key, couldn't we? Well, here's another tip to see what key that you're in. First, play the first measure, play the chord. There's usually some kind of chord going on. Or if the notes are spread out, you'll just have to play them all at once. But luckily, in this case, we just have a chord, all 3 notes played at the same time. Play the right hand with it. And just play those notes and hold on to them. Play them a few times maybe. That sounds pretty major to me. So that's a very big clue that we're actually in a major key and not a minor key. Because if we were in minor, the first chord would probably be this. Ooh, I like the sound of that actually. That's really cool. But anyway, we're starting on major, so we're probably in major. Here's another tip. Go to the last chord or the last measure, and it should be the same thing almost. And let's see. So we have the notes separated a little bit, but we do have a chord here. And I'm going to play the left hand note with it. We're in the last measure here. Just playing that first set of notes. Does that sound major or minor? Well, we know that it's major. So 99.9% of the time, the first chord and last chord are probably going to be major if it's a major key and minor if it's a minor key. Now, you can be thrown a curveball by the composer, but that's, if you're a beginner, that's not happening. What I said is going to apply 99.9% of the time. Now, real quick, I want to talk about this thing over here, or I guess it's over here, called the circle of fifths. You may have seen or heard about it before. If you really practice everything I told you up till now, you won't really need it. However, I really want to tell you what this is about and how to use this tool. And actually, when you're just starting out figuring out your key signatures, it doesn't hurt, excuse me, to have a circle of fifths nearby to double check your answers. And let's see how we're going to decipher this thing. So the first place I want you to look is at the top here where we have major keys and it says C. And then it goes around in a circle to G, D, A. And this is why it's called the circle of fifths, because each one next to the last one in the circle of fifths is 5 notes away. So we started on C. Remember the next one was G. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Whoa, what's the next one in the circle? Like kind of going clockwise. D. How much you want to bet the next one's A? And sure enough, the next one is A. So that's why they call it the circle of fifths, just to kind of tell you that. And then if you look on the outside of the circle, right, we have these key signatures, which remember are visual representations of the key that you're in. So this is telling us, if we're looking at 12 o'clock here on the circle of fifths where it says major keys C, and look above that, that's the key of C major. It has no sharps, no flats. If you go basically to 1 o'clock, we have the key of G major, which has 1 sharp, F sharp. So this is all the stuff I said basically in visual format. Like again, if you are just learning your keys, it's kind of a good tool to double check, make sure you have the right answers. And if you look on the inside of the circle, it says minor keys A. And look, on the minor keys, they each can correspond to their appropriate key signature. So again, you don't have to, if you do all the stuff I said, you're going to have that memorized already. However, it's important to know what it is, and you want to use it to your advantage in the beginning. So you just look up circle of fifths. You can find it anywhere pretty much. Next, we got to talk about chords. So what is a chord? Well, I mentioned in the beginning of this lesson that a chord is when you're playing multiple notes at the same time, usually 2 or more. So here we have a chord. And this is what we call a C major chord. Every chord has a root, a third, and a fifth. The root is the bottom of the note. It's kind of like the tonic for a scale. It's the note everything's based on, right? The third is 3 notes away, 1, 2, 3. And that's why this is called the fifth, because it's 5 notes away from the root. So it's root, and then every number corresponds to how far away it is from the root. For example, this would be 7, 9, 11, 13, and so forth. Now, when you're just starting out, I wouldn't bog yourself down with like 7th chords. I mean, I would know what they are. A 7th chord is just a 4-note chord, and it has a 7th, which is, remember, 7 notes between this note and the root. But I would just know what those are to begin with, but I would really become familiar with these 4 types of chords. Major sounds bright and happy. Minor sounds dark and sad. Remember, we're talking about major and minor scales? Well, there's major and minor chords. When you play a major chord and you want to make it minor, all you do is lower that middle note by a half step, and that automatically gives you a minor chord. Now, let's talk about how to create a major chord built on any note. You play the root, so let's say E major chord. You're going to play E. Then what you're going to do is you're going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4 half steps for semitones. And then from that note, you're going to go up 1, 2, 3. So 4 and 3 is the formula there. And you can do that built on any note to figure out what the notes are. It takes some time at first, but I recommend you practice that. So you hit a note, go up 4 half steps, and then 3 more. Now remember, let's play an E major chord, which we just did. How do you turn it into E minor? Well, remember, you take the middle note and you flat it. So now our formula is 3 half steps and then 4 half steps between the middle notes. Then you want to become familiar with what we call a diminished chord, which sounds dark and crunchy. It really has a crunch to it. Like that, you know, like the train is coming to run you over or something. Maybe I shouldn't be so morbid, but you know what I mean. It definitely has it's not just sad, it really bites. And the formula for that one is you play a note, you go up 3 half steps and 3 more, so 3 and 3. Now the opposite of a diminished chord is an augmented chord, which sounds more mysterious, I would say. Also has that crunch though. It can be very normal to mistake diminished and augmented chords, but you can hear that this has a bit more space between the notes. And if you think about it, to augment means make larger. So basically what we did is we took a major chord and we raised that one a half step, and we made the distances between all the notes larger, or we augmented them. And a diminished chord, we're actually diminishing the spaces between the notes. So become familiar with those 4 types of chords. Next, I would become familiar with chord inversions. So if a chord has the root note on the bottom, guess what? We call it root position. However, you can change up the order of those notes. You don't have to play it C, E, G. You could play it E, G, C or G, C, E. It's actually all the same chord so long as it contains those 3 notes. However, it's only in root position if the root is on the bottom, right? Makes sense. And then if you take the root and move it up an octave, you have first inversion. You always know you're in first inversion if there's a larger space towards the upper end of the chord. That's very important. Second inversion, you always know you're in second inversion if there's a larger space on the bottom of the chord. So just know, root position evenly stacked. First inversion, there's a gap up top. Second inversion, there's a gap up bottom. And then if you invert it again, you're actually back to root position. Okay, I want to take a moment to talk about how chords relate to keys and scales and things like that. So up top, we have the C major scale written in eighth notes, so it would be played like this. No sharps, no flats. Now, I want to tell you that you can build a chord on each of these. Remember, there's 7 individual notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can build a chord on each of these notes. And it's going to look like this. So just like there's 7 individual notes, there's 7 chords to play with. This is literally called the first chord. It's built on the first note. We also call that the tonic chord, by the way, because it's built on the tonic. You know what that is by now. And, you know, every scale and every chord and every key has 7 chords that they can work with just by building chords on each note of the scale. The most important chords are the first chord, the 4th chord, the 5th chord, and also that last chord, which is also the 1 chord. And we call these primary chords. And if you play them back to back, actually, we're going to play it with the left hand. That is what we call a chord progression, a 1-4-5-1 progression. And that is the most common chord progression in all of music. But you don't always have to do 1-4-5. You could do like 1-2-5, 1-2-7-1. So there's a bunch of combinations you can make with these 8 chords, but just letting you know that you create these chords by laying out the scale, basically building snowmen on each of the notes to create those 3-note triad chords, we call them. And the primary, most important ones in most pieces are 1-4-5-1, and that's what you got to know. So we talked a lot about chords, chord progressions, and keys, which are like kind of the backbones to creating harmony, which are like the background notes that really help reinforce the song. Remember when I played Jingle Bells in the intro? We added those chords to it with the left hand to really fill out the sound. Now, we got to talk about the top line, which is called the melody. So in Jingle Bells, jingle all the way, that is the melody to Jingle Bells. The melody to like For Elise is this one. And everybody knows that one. It's like the part of the song that you would hum or sing to yourself. Let's talk about what makes a good melody, especially for beginners. Now, I know some of you listening to Radiohead are going to say, oh, you know, Radiohead does it this way and it's totally different. We're not talking about Radiohead right now. We're talking about like classical music and beginner piano music. So here are 4 things that make or maybe it's 3 things that make a great melody, especially looking at it from a beginner's perspective. Number 1, a good melody has mostly steps, less skips, and fewer leaps. And I talked about this in the beginning of the lesson where I was talking about that notes can, remember, they can step, hitting every note, all the white keys in between, or they can move in skips, skipping over every other note, or they can move in larger gaps than that, and those are called leaps. So remember what I just said, mostly steps, right? So like the beginning of For Elise, that is just stepping, really from E to D sharp. And look, there's a little bit of a leap there, a skip, step, and then skip. So remember what I said, mostly steps, step, 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 very few leaps, and a few skips. And that's what makes a great melody. Looking at Jingle Bells, right? So here we have notes remaining the same. I said that could happen. You're going up, you're skipping up, and then there's a leap here leading into steps at the end. So we had mostly steps, like some notes remaining the same, mostly steps, 1 skip, or 2 skips and 1 leap. And so it tracks. You know, if you look at your melodies and a lot of things that you're playing, you're going to see mostly steps, less skips, and very few leaps. However, if you had a melody that just skipped or stepped all the time, it would be very boring. It would just be like this. It would sound more like an exercise than it would a piece, and the leaps really help add a lot of intrigue, same thing with the skips, to make the piece what it is. If you had a piece that was just all skips, it would sound like this. And it actually, I did have some skips in there as well. But as you can see, it sounded a bit disjointed. It sounded kind of cool, but right, it didn't really have a flow to it beginning to end. Like, wouldn't flow beginning to end like for release. Next, I want to talk about chord tones and non-chord tones. So in music, a lot of times we have chords being played with our left hand. And then usually, you know, we'll do Jingle Bells one more time as an example here. And you have a melody in the right hand. The chord tones are notes that belong in the chord. So if you have a C major chord down here, if you're playing an E in the melody, that E is a chord tone. So all chord tones so far. Non-chord tones. So this D right here in the melody does not belong to the chord below, and we call that a non-chord tone. And if it is surrounded by if it's surrounded by chord tones, the C and the E, we call that a passing tone because it passes between them. So here we have chord tones, chord tones, chord tones, chord tones, chord tones, but then here's our passing tones back to a chord tone. So the most important thing you got to remember is that chord tones belong to the chord below it. Non-chord tones do not. And one other thing I'm going to mention is that non-chord tones usually resolve 99% of the time back to chord tones. That's why that passing tone, it didn't stay on that D, it went back to an E. It could have also gone back to C. It can resolve that way too. And in that case, we call that a neighbor tone because you have chord tone, non-chord tone, and then back to that tone. It's just, you know, you're hitting the non-chord tone neighboring the chord tones. By the way, I could make a whole lesson on non-chord tones. If that's something that you want, let me know in the comments. I would love to hear from you. Okay, we have a few more important things to cover. The next thing I want to talk about is phrasing. So you see these arcing lines over the notes. You may know them as slurs, and those help create phrases since they help blend. So if something has slurs on it, you're going to play them more smoothly beginning to end. Here I want to take this Pathétique Sonata. This is movement 2, by the way. And I want to take this to illustrate another point, something that you should be on the lookout for beyond melody and harmony and things like that. This might look a little complicated to you, but that's fine. So taking a look at this line of music, let's pick out some of what I call the finer details, which are what I would say things beyond just melody and harmony. So here we go. I'm going to circle them. You have these lines up here. These are called slur lines. You're going to play these notes smoothly connected together. So this last slur line is going to go from the G to the D. And so the opposite of that would be go like this. Play them real short. So you're connecting those notes. And those help create what we call phrases. Because if you think about when you speak, there's certain things you kind of blend together, comma, and then you have like kind of breaks in between it. So I would think about slurs as like a sentence going on. And then whenever you have like a rest or something like that, that's like a pause in the sentence that you're trying to get across. I see a pianissimo sign here. What are we going to do with that? We're going to play very, very soft. So to make music what it is, you really got to pay attention to some of these finer details. Like we have staccatos down here with slur lines on them. So you're going to play those with a bit shorter on those. So let me play this line. Let me first maybe play it without any of these details added in, and then we're going to add in the details. So here's the one without all the finer details. Let me try again. Sounded a bit flat. Here's what it is with all of those things I talked about. As you see, just adding in those staccatos, those slur lines, that pianissimo in the middle really brought the piece to life. And I can make a whole lesson on the finer details. And if you want that, let me know in the comments. It really helps me know what you guys want. But the point I want to make, without getting into the nitty gritty, which would take hours, is I just want to implore you to start paying attention to these finer details in your music, because this is what's going to transform your playing. Not only just understanding like the harmony and things like that, but really taking it to the next level, elevating it with those finer, minute details. So as I promised in the intro, we're actually going to do a music analysis to wrap up this entire lesson to make sure that you understand everything. And the way it's going to work is we're going to be taking a look at this Chopin piece. I'll show you in a second. And I'll be asking you about 6 or 7 questions about it. And then I'll give you a chance to think about those questions. And then I'll answer those questions to make sure you got it right. So let's take a look at the piece at hand. So this is Chopin Prelude, Opus 28, number 4. I had to check the number. I didn't want to tell you what the name of this piece is because it gives away at least the first question. Are you ready? Question number 1, what key are we in? And how do we figure that out? So I want you to think about that, maybe write down the answer to that. I'll tell you when we're done here at the end. Question the second, what is the musical texture of this piece? At least what we can see in these first 3 lines or so. Number 3, what are the dynamics of the piece? And where do they change? Maybe circle them. Question number 4, where is the melody in this piece? Is it treble clef or bass clef? Question number 5, are there any chord inversions happening? And how do we know if a chord is inverted? Question the 6, where are the articulations? Maybe circle them, label some of them if you want. Okay, now take a few minutes to figure that out, and now I'm going to give you the answers. Okay, question 1 was, what key are we in, and how do we figure this out? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the key signature. See how there is a sharp right here? There's only one sharp written there, which tells you that F sharp is sharp throughout the whole piece, unless it tells you otherwise. Now, the second way we can figure this out is by playing the very first chord and seeing whether it is major or minor. So let's just play the first measure, and you tell me what you think. And that's the first chord. What do you think? Major, which would sound bright and happy, or kind of gave it to you, minor. So we are in a minor key. And the question is, what minor key has 1 sharp? Well, and to answer that, we figure out the major key with 1 sharp, which if you go through this lesson again, you'll be able to figure out that that is the key of G. And remember, it's G major. So to find the minor equivalent, we go 1, 2, 3 half steps down. And we are in the key of E minor. Question number 2 was, what is the musical texture? Well, if you take a look at the top line, we have a melody up here. We're only playing 1 note at a time. And in the left hand, you have background chords. So in the lesson, I called it, here's the answer, melody and chord structure, but another word for this is actually homophony, which basically means you have a melody on top with chords in the background. If it was monophony, meaning the same, it would mean that you have the same notes between each hand, like that. So that would be monophony. And then polyphony, which unfortunately I can't even do here, would be if I had 2 different melodies going on at the same time. But this normal chord and melody structure that you're going to see all the time is called homophony. Next question was, what are the dynamics of this piece? Well, remember, it tells you how loud or soft to play. So that P right in the beginning there, piano, we're playing soft. So the real answer is soft, but there are a few like crescendos and things like that, right there and right there. And other than that, you have little crescendos, but for the most part, you're playing a lot of piano, but like I said, you do have some what we call swelling in here. So you're getting loud and then soft. You have a little forte in there. So the real answer is mostly piano, but there are some swells in a few areas you will want to look out for. Next question, maybe I should have asked this question before the music texture question, because I kind of already answered it. Hopefully you were paying attention. The question is, where's the melody of this piece? And hopefully you're paying attention that it is on the right hand. Remember, the melodies, the part of the song that you will sing out to yourself. 5 was, are there chord inversions happening? And the answer is absolutely. And the second part of that answer was, how do we know chord inversions are happening? And that's because if we're looking at the chords, right, they're not evenly stacked like a snowman. There's actually a bit larger space at the top of the chord, signifying that we are actually playing a lot of first inversion chords throughout this piece. Last question, and then I actually have a bonus tip at the end, of course, like all lessons we do on this channel. The last question, where are the articulations and what are they? So remember, an articulation tells you how to play the note. So we actually have a giant articulation. Well, I actually don't know if this is necessarily, well, I guess it is, because it's telling you how to play the note a certain way. We actually have our first articulation right there. And then even right here, those are slur lines, just meaning that we're smoothly connecting between one note and the next one. It's hard to talk and play at the same time. So smoothly connected. And actually, a grace note, I should say, is more like an ornamentation, we call that. But right below it, where I've circled, that is an accent. That is an articulation. So there you go. So just learn to spot those little things that give yourself more information on how to play the note, not just what note to play or loud or soft. Are you playing it short? Are you playing them smoothly connected? You know, things, are you playing them accented? Things like that. So here's the final tip. Are you ready? Well, music theory is just one of many things you're going to need to master piano or any other instrument. In fact, there's one skill that's going to help you be able to understand music theory 10 times better, and that skill is reading music. And I happen to have a lesson called How to Read Music in One Easy Lesson. I even have some others on some advanced strategies, but I want you to watch this particular one right here, right after this lesson. It will help you out a ton. It's been your piano teacher, Tim, here. Thank you for coming today, and I'll see you in the next lesson.